Hey guys, don't you hate it when you're shooting outdoors and there's these ugly dead patches of grass that are ruining your photos? It's so frustrating. In this episode of Edit My Photo, we're going to say goodbye to ugly dead brown grass and hello to lovely lush green grass. If you enjoyed this video, you're more than welcome to subscribe to my channel. That way you'll never miss any of my new pet photography editing tutorials. Hi, I'm Charlotte Rees from Learn Pet Photography and you've tuned into episode 5 of Edit My Photo. Edina was the winner of this month's Edit My Photo challenge. I post these challenges monthly in my Real Shoots Complete course Facebook group. I'll pop that link to the course below in the description so you can suss that out and hopefully we might see you in the course in the future. For this challenge, I wanted to try and get as many of my real shooters to participate as possible, so I chose one of my favourite images for them to edit. This shot of Border Collies, Faith, Blue and Yoshi was shot at a local vineyard for my book, Tales of Brisbane, back in 2016. Out of all the different submissions that I received, I chose Edina's edit because I absolutely love the way she's dealt with the tones in the image. The dogs especially look great with all the different fur colours edited beautifully. She's also paid attention to detail to remove the distractions in the image and come up with a very clever solution for dealing with the top blown out area of the image as well. As the winner of the challenge, Edina submitted this image for me to edit. The main thing we're going to be concentrating on in this edit is dealing with these patches of dead grass. It's actually a pretty common problem that you come across when photographing dogs because dogs are so close to the ground, so you see all that detail at ground level. It just makes that dead grass really visible. We're also going to be making some edits to the image to help the dog's face stand out more and also to deal with the nether regions and make them a little bit less noticeable. Make sure you watch all the way to the end so you can see the finished result, and as always I welcome your feedback and questions in the comments section. So enough chit chat, let's dive into this edit. Okay, so this image has some really great things going for it and a few things that we do need to spend a little bit of time fixing up. So first of all, I love the expression on the dog's face. It's really engaging, it's really cute. And also the pose is a little bit different as well, and I think that works really well in this kind of context. The things that we're going to have to fix up, it's obviously taken in probably a backyard. There is some dead grass in this sort of area here, and there's some distractions in the background. There's a bush over here that isn't very attractive. So we're definitely going to spend a bit of time fixing all that sort of stuff up. So we'll start off with just some basic adjustments in Lightroom here in the raw file. As you can see, the image has been exposed quite nicely. We've got a good range of tones in the histogram, all the way from the shadows all the way up to the very bright highlights. First of all, I'm just going to go through and do some adjustments under the basic adjustments panel here in Lightroom. So I'm going to take the highlights down because we don't want to leave that lovely detail she's managed to retain there. I'm going to take the shadows up, take the whites up a little bit to add some contrast, take the blacks down. This is all pretty standard kind of stuff that I do to most images, taking the clarity and the vibrance up a bit. I'm going to take the highlights down here as well. At this stage, I'm going to warm the image up a little bit. So I think the tint isn't too bad. Maybe just a little bit of a tweak of the tint there, but it mostly just needed to be warmed up a bit. I think that's a pretty good white balance there. Let me just go through and get this looking really good. So I think that looks pretty good in terms of global adjustments. If I just do a really quick before and after here, you'll see that all I've really done is warm it up, added a bit more contrast and got all the tones looking nice. Got a bit more detail in the dog's eye now, which is really good. So I think in terms of Lightroom, that's pretty much all I'm going to do to this image here. Most of the work's going to happen in Photoshop, so let's head over there now. So I'm going to start off in Photoshop just removing some distractions. There's a few different tools that I'm going to use for this. The patch tool, the clone stamp tool, the spot healing brush tool, anything that will allow me to just quickly and easily remove distractions. Often I will use content aware fill, so I'm just going to dive straight in and do that. Now, there's a bit of an elephant in the room. While I do really love this pose of this dog, it does present a rather in-your-face type nether region sort of area that's right in the center of the image. We're lucky that this dog has quite a furry bottom and we can't really see details in there, but I am going to go in and just delicately fix up this area so it's not quite so in your face. I'm just going to reduce the impact of it, I suppose. So one way to do this will be just to remove the red and yellow color casts in here, make it a little bit more, look a bit more neutral. So I have a tear staining removal action here that I run. All this action does is create a hue saturation adjustment layer, and under reds and yellows, it just reduces the saturation and adds lightness. So all I need to do after I've run that action is just to select the mask, select the brush tool, make sure it's a white brush, and then brush in over the area that I would like to deal with. So it's basically just this area here. I'm also going to tweak that a little bit more by just going into the reds and increasing the lightness, and also going into the yellows and taking the lightness up. So sometimes it actually takes a little bit too much saturation out and it looks a little bit weird, and sometimes all you really need to do is adjust the lightness in that area. So I think that sort of helps to reduce the impact of that particular section. I'm going to flatten that, and then I'm actually going to use the clone stamp tool to just go over it just a little bit more. I'm not completely going to remove it because that would also look quite weird. I'm just going to go over it and make it a little bit less noticeable. So how's that? Let's have a look at the before and then the after, which is here. A bit better, right? I think so. Okay, so let's try and deal with this dead grass. Now, I'm going to use other parts of the image to try and help cover some of this grass and also sort of improve the composition and the flow of the image. But the first step I'm actually going to take in this is to change the color of that dead grass to green. Now, it's not going to improve the texture of the grass because it will still look like kind of flat dead grass, but it does mean that if we put other grass over the top of it, it's just going to blend a little bit better, and we're not going to have dead grass, the color of the dead grass showing through from underneath. So to do this, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to grab the brush and I'm going to make it a nice dark green. I'm thinking probably that's a good color. Now I'm going to make this brush a bit bigger, and I'm just going to carefully paint in over these dead grass sections here. Now it's going to look a bit weird to start with, but bear with me. Now I'm also going to go up here and paint over the top of this area at the top, because I'm actually going to completely get rid of this. It looks like a building or something at the top here. So now I think we've gone over the top of all the dead grass areas. Now is when the magic happens. So with this new layer up here in the layers palette, I'm going to set the blending mode of that layer to hue. And what that does is it allows the bottom layer to show through, but the color from the extra layer that we've set the blending mode to hue in actually apply the color to the background there. So I'm also going to take the opacity down a little bit. So as you can see, it hasn't really fixed the dead grass, but it has definitely helped to change the color of the dead grass to more like the color of the rest of the green grass. And that's just the first step. Okay, now that I've got that looking good, so if I turn that layer on and off, you can see the difference that that's made. Now, in order to improve the composition and the flow of this image, I would actually like to add a little bit more out of focus grass in the foreground on the right hand side here, because I kind of feel like that'll help lead us up through the dog's body to the focus of the image, which is the dog's face. We really want to emphasize the dog's face in this shot. So what I'm going to do, and this will also help clean up the dead grass a little bit as well. What I'm going to do is duplicate the background layer. I'm going to flip that layer by going to Edit, Transform, flip horizontal. I'm going to add a mask to this layer, so making sure that layer is selected. It's going to be a black mask, so I'm going to hold down Option and then click the mask icon in the layers palette here to add the mask. So as you can see, we can now not see that layer at all because the black is concealing all of it. And then what I'm going to do is grab a brush, make sure it's a nice big white brush, and I'm going to paint in on the right hand side of the image to reveal what we've got here. So as you can see, it's basically a mirror image of the left hand side. We're going to do a few little fixes that make it not quite so obvious that it's been mirrored. So to start with, I'm just going to make sure that I've got everything masked or unmasked that I want or don't want. You'll notice if we go too far over to the right hand side, we start seeing the edge of the dog here. So sometimes it's a good idea to do that, and then you can switch to a black brush and actually erase that. So fill that mask in again by painting in black. So now we know what the limits are exactly. So in order to make this not quite so mirror-like, I'm actually going to move that a little bit. So I'm just going to grab the Move tool and I'm going to move this over to a point where I'm still covering up most of the dead grass, but where it's not quite so obvious what I've done. And I'm also going to move it down a little bit too, just so that the two sides don't match up perfectly. So I think that's probably a pretty good position. I'm just going to go and fiddle with this mask and just make absolutely sure that I'm masking everything that I want to. Okay, so as you can see, that's a little bit fiddly. Sometimes with masks, you have to kind of paint back and forth with the black and white brushes to really make sure that you're revealing or concealing the parts of that layer that you do or don't want in the image. So I think I've got that to a pretty good state. If I turn that layer on and off, you can kind of see the areas that I've been fiddling with. Now, we've still got a bit of dead grass here, and I would like to cover that over. So what we're going to do is turn that layer off for now. Going back to the background layer, I'm going to grab the marquee tool, which is basically a square selection or a rectangular selection. I'm going to go over this part of the image, and then I'm going to copy and paste just that section of the image. Now it's pasted it in exactly the same spot, so we can't really see it. But what I'm going to do is move it over to the left to a point where it's covering some of this dead grass here. So I'm going to move it over to about here. And then yes, I'm going to, as you probably guessed, add a mask again. So Option and then Add Mask. I'll add a nice black mask. And then I'm going to grab the brush and just paint in these dead areas of grass to see if we can reveal some of this nice grass underneath that we've grabbed from further over on the right hand side of the image. Now, as you can see, I am actually just revealing more dead grass in some of these areas, so I will need to tweak this. But also, as you can see, I'm getting some nice green grass in areas where it was quite dead before. So if I turn that off and on, you'll see what I've done there. Now I'm going to just go back on the area where I revealed the dead grass because we don't want to add more dead grass. And then what I'm going to do is turn this other layer at the top with the nice grass from the right hand side on, and then unlink the mask on the extra little bit we added to cover the dead grass. So I'm going to unlink the mask so I can move the layer independently from the mask. So the mask stays in the same spot and the layer moves underneath it to reveal different parts of the layer. So now that I select the layer, I can use the arrow keys on the keyboard and actually just move that over, and you'll see in the image here, move it over to where I want it. Now that is now starting to show the very edge of the image. So we don't want to go that far over. we want to go tuck that back underneath this top layer that we've got. Now that we've moved it over, I'm wondering if we've actually got a bit more green here we can reveal. A little bit extra. So I don't think we're going to be able to get rid of this particular bit of dead grass here, but we can use another method to do that. That's no problem. So now if I turn that layer, I'm just going to link it back up again just so it's tidy. Now if I turn that layer off and on again, you can see the bits of dead grass that I've managed to cover up using that layer. Now I'm just going to go in and refine this mask and make double sure that I'm not covering anything up that I shouldn't be. Okay, so as you can see, I just had to do a little bit of fine tuning there around the dog's foot to make sure I wasn't covering over part of the dog's foot, and also keeping the shadow under the dog's foot as well. So I didn't take that extra bit all the way up to the edge of the dog's foot because I wanted to keep the dog standing on something. And because the dog is standing on dead grass, it's actually only because we changed the color of that grass in the first step that that's actually looking good. Now that I've done those two layers, I want to try and fill in this area. This is a bit of a problem area here that we're having. So I want to try and fill that area in with some grass from over here. And I'm just going to do that manually. So if I select the background layer, I'm going to grab the clone stamp tool, make sure it's set to about probably 80% opacity is a good number. I'm going to sample from over on the right hand side here where there's some nice green lush grass. And I'm just going to paint that in onto this area here that was looking quite dead still. So now when I turn these other layers on again, okay, I think that's actually looking pretty good. We've managed to cover up pretty much all the dead grass using those extra two layers that we stole. Now I think it's pretty much good enough that we can flatten this and then go in and do all the fine tuning stuff. So I'm going to flatten that down. So we've just got the background layer. And now in order to make it look like we haven't grabbed part of the image and just flipped it to the other side, we need to make the two sides look a little bit different. So some of the giveaways here are these bright pieces of grass being perfectly reflected over onto this side. So I'm going to go in and remove those bits of grass. I'm also going to go in and fix up these sorts of areas here. I want to make this just a nice solid green so it looks like the dog is standing in a nice green field instead of in the backyard. And I'm also going to fix up these areas here a little bit more. Now there is a bit of a weird color going on here, and this is because we used that hue layer over something that was blue and it's gone a little bit strange. So I'm just going to use a different technique to fix that up. So I'm going to grab the clone stamp tool. Now I need to set the blending mode to color. So when you usually use the clone stamp tool, you're actually clone stamping pixels from one area to another area. But instead of getting actual pixels, it's just getting the color of those pixels. So we can sample from this lovely green area over to the left and stamp over the top of this weird color stuff going on, and all it's going to grab is the color. I'm going to set the opacity to 100, and now when I sample from over this area and go over the top of this sort of brownish sort of area here and the bit of weirdness where the blue thing was, it's going to look a lot more consistently green, which is what we want for this background. So I'm just going to go in and quickly and do that. Okay, now we've got that pretty well sorted. That top section is green. I'm going to go in and do all the fixing up that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to remove duplicate bits of grass and see if I can tidy up the background a little bit more. Alrighty, so I think we've successfully made it look like this dog is just in a lovely field of beautiful lush green grass, which is pretty much what I was hoping to achieve. There is one other thing that we could probably do to help improve this image, and what I would like to do is make it look like it's got a little bit more depth of field, or a little bit less depth of field rather than it has. I think this dog's head would stand out really nicely, even more nicely, if this was even more blurry in the background. So what I'm going to want to do is add some extra blur to the background and extra blur to the foreground as well, and that will also sort of help mask any issues that we've got with flipping that background. So in order to do this, we need to duplicate the background layer, not once but twice. With this background layer, I'm actually going to completely remove the dog from the background. So I'm going to just select the dog and just content aware. So edit, fill, content aware. I want to make it look like the dog isn't there because this is the background layer that we're going to completely blur. You can actually still see the dog there because we're not actually looking at that layer, we're looking at the top layer. So let me turn that top layer off. It hasn't done a really fantastic job there. I just want to make sure this is nice and sort of blurry. I'm just going to use the patch tool instead and maybe a little bit of the clone stamp tool to get the kind of look that I want. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. In order to do a blur, we're going to go Filter, Blur Gallery, Tilt Shift. And what the Tilt Shift blur does is it blurs the background and the foreground, so it's going to work really, really well in this situation. We're in a sort of a special area of Photoshop here. It's called the Blur Gallery. I have the Tilt Shift selected here, and I'm just going to increase the blur. So if we increase it all the way up, you see it completely blurs out the foreground and background. We don't want to completely blur it out. You can also grab this little circle in the middle, and that will then adjust the blur, but it does exactly the same thing. And also we've got to think about where the dog's head is as well, and which part we want to be sharp and which part we want to be blurry. So you can actually move this around, and we want to make sure that the parts that are sharp stay sharp, which is this little slice through the middle here. So I'm actually going to move this down here a bit. And see, we've got some nice sharp grass here in the section here. So that's kind of what we want to do. And we want to make it progressively blurrier as it goes towards the background and the foreground. You can also change the width of the sharp area. So I guess the depth of field and how quickly it blurs off as well. So I'm thinking this is looking pretty good here. Okay, I think that's a pretty good level. So I'm going to click OK on this. Now what we want to do is put the dog back, and that's what this top layer is for. So I'm going to turn that top layer on. So we have to make sure that this top layer is selected, and to mask the dog, we're going to select the dog first and go select and mask. We can just do a little shortcut and click select subject, and Photoshop should detect the subject quite nicely. As you can see, the red area is the non-selected area. So the very handy tool that we give in here in the select and mask workspace is this second one down here, and this is the refine edge tool. Now this tool does seem to work best if you get quite a large brush and just kind of run it along the entire edge, and it does a pretty good job of actually picking up all those individual hairs. So as you can see, this mask is looking pretty good. It really does quite a good job here. So I'm going to output this to a layer mask. So we might want to make sure layer mask is selected here and go OK. And then now, as you can see, we have the dog sitting on that layer. So we do actually want the background to show through in certain areas. So the base background that we've got that we don't really want to edit too much. As you can see, we've got some blurry stuff going on here. So we're going to add a mask to just the background layer here. And we're going to make it a black mask. So I'm going to hold down Option, click the mask, and now we're going to paint in this where we want this blurry background to be. So a nice big white brush, and I'm just going to swoosh this across the background here and across the foreground here. So now we've got a lovely bit of blurriness behind the dog's head. You just add a bit more blur here and here. Love working with masks. You can just go back and forth until you've got it right. Looking at the foreground, I think we've got that looking pretty good as well. Just turning that layer on and off. Yeah, I think that looks really good. So see what a wonderful job that masking tool has done to actually preserve all those little bits of fur. It's done a really, really good job there. So I'm going to flatten that because I'm happy with that. So before I run my final polish up action, I'm going to go in, and because the dog's face and eyes are going to be the focus of this, I'm going to go in and see if I can help to improve the look of the dog's eyes by removing some of the bits of hair over the dog's eyeballs. So I'm just going to go in here and use the patch tool and just see if I can get the eyes looking just a little bit clearer. So that may have looked a little bit fiddly, but it's definitely worth doing. I'm just going to dodge around the eyes and the face as well using the dodge tool just to help kind of lighten it up. Again, the face is going to be our focal point, so we want the face to be nice and light, and other areas of the image to be dark, because your attention is always drawn to the lightest areas of the image. We don't want to draw too much attention to the back of the dog, as for reasons we've already discussed. So I think that is probably as far as I want to take that. I'm going to run my polish up action. So this action goes and creates a bunch of different adjustment layers that sometimes I use, sometimes I don't use. Sometimes I turn them off or adjust them depending on the image. It does include an eye sparkle section here. So I'm going to go in and paint into this layer. Now this action is something that's available to members of my Real Shoots Complete course, or you can just create something yourself. Fairly easy process to create actions in Photoshop. So I've got a contrast layer and a sharpen layer. I'm going to paint into the eyes using both those layers. I really want these eyes to stand out. So if I turn that on or off, let's zoom in a bit, that's off, on. Yeah, I think those eyes stand out really nicely now. I may use this sharpen layer just to sharpen up the face a little, because that's the part of the image that we want to be most sharp and most interesting. So I'm just going to sharpen this area here. So if I turn that off and on, you may not see a huge difference, but it's just helped to define the dog's face a little bit more. So I'm going to flatten that, and I think that's pretty much all we're going to do in Photoshop here. We're going to go back into Lightroom to do some cropping and vignetting and stuff like that, but I'm actually pretty happy with how this is looking so far. So here we are back in Lightroom. I just wanted to give you a really quick overview of what we've done so far. So this is the original image. This is actually the Lightroom edit of the original image. So if I reset that, it goes right back to the raw. So this is the raw. And then this is what we've ended up with after taking the image through Photoshop and doing all those little fix-ups. I think it's made a really, really big difference to the image. It's a lot simpler. The focus is definitely on the dog's face a lot more. Now, there's a couple of things we can do in Lightroom to help this, to help make the dog the focus of the image even more. First of all is cropping. So I don't like to crop until after I get back into Lightroom, because I like to have my final edited PSD file uncropped. And I do this because if it's for a client and they would like to order, say, a canvas, I like to have all the image available so I can do a full canvas wrap. Same as with albums as well. If the image is going in an album, it might be cropped a little bit differently. So I like to have as much image as I possibly can in that master PSD file. And so I do all my final cropping in Lightroom. So I'm going to crop this in I'm gonna crop it in a fair way because I actually want to pretty much center this dog in the middle of this image. So I'm actually getting rid of quite a bit of image here. Now, if I didn't want such a tight crop, I did want to leave more image around the edge, I would then go back into Photoshop and do a content aware crop to actually create extra space at the top and the left of the image. So that is a good solution if you wanted a crop that's not quite so tight. So I'm going to commit that one. Now I'm going to add a bit of an overall vignette to the image. So if we go down here and do effects, I'm just going to take that slider to the left a little bit, and just that tiny little change just really helps to draw your attention into the face of the dog there. So you can also create a custom vignette using the radial adjustment filter. So I'm going to grab that, I'm going to draw it just around the dog's, center it on the dog's face, and then take the exposure down. And as you can see, that takes the exposure down and creates a bit of a spotlight effect. Now, we don't want to go that far. We probably want to go to about, I don't know, maybe about there. Let me turn that off and on again. It's maybe even a little bit far. So maybe about there. We do want to make sure that we're not accidentally darkening any parts of the dog's face that we don't want to. So I'm going to press O on the keyboard to turn the overlay on. Grab the brush, set it to erase, zoom in a little bit, make sure auto mask is selected, and just make sure that that mask is not going over the white bits. We do not want the dog's face to be darkened in any way because we've gone to so much trouble to make it nice and bright and sharp. So it's the focal point of the image. Not too worried about the dog's tail or the rest of its body. That could be darkened down a little bit because we don't want the attention to be there. Okay, turn the overlay off. And I'm just going to adjust the crop in a little bit more. And I think that's it. I think that's our final image. So let's go back to the raw file. So that's your before. And then that's the after. So I really like the way that the dog's face is now the focal point of this image rather than the nether regions of the dog and the things lying on the ground and the bits of dead grass and the blue thing in the background. So we've basically really simplified this image. We've removed all the distractions and we've created a nice, clean image that really focuses on how the viewer's eye moves around the image and what it rests on, which is those beautiful little sparkly brown eyes in that very cute little furry white face. So thanks for joining me for this one. I hope you've enjoyed it and picked up a few more tools to add to your toolbox. If you have any comments or questions about this editing tutorial, just let me know. Just post a comment and I'll get back to you. It's always good to get feedback from people. I love to hear how it's helped you or if there's any new techniques that you've learned. And always remember to subscribe as well, because that way you get notified of any new editing tutorials that I post. So that's it for now, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.